Hey guys, it's Jane, and I'm here to do this week's Babbles topic for the SFF BookTube Awards. Now, this week's topic is favourite urban fantasy books and series. Now, I don't actually read a huge amount of urban fantasy. There are a couple of answers to this that came straight to mind, but I really had to scratch around to come up with 5, and I tried to get 5 because this is a crossover thing with Top 5 Wednesday. So this is what I've come up with. The first 2 answers aren't going to surprise anybody. It is Kate Daniels, the Kate Daniels series written by Ilona Andrews. This is a series set in Atlanta, Georgia. The first book, Magic Bites, was published in 2007, and book 10 is actually due out this year. So the Kate Daniels stories follows, surprise, surprise, Kate Daniels. The world that the story takes place in is our world, but something has happened. Technology is on the wane, magic is on the rise. There are vampires and werebeasts of all sorts of varieties and other strange things. Kate has a very complicated family history. Now she basically likes beating stuff up and getting paid for it. Things progress throughout the series. The action is written really well as far as I'm concerned in these books. I find the characterization really quite enjoyable. I really enjoy the friendships between the characters, especially Kate's friendships with a number of other female characters in the books. These may not be the greatest books ever written, but I highly enjoy them and I always read them, the next one, when it comes out. So that's a big recommendation from me, from a non-urban fantasy reader. I really enjoy the Kate Daniels books. The second series is a new series. It's only started quite recently. It's the Arcadia Project books by Mishell Baker. The first one of these, Borderline, was published in 2016, and the third one is actually out in just a couple of weeks. It's out at the beginning of March. The main character is Millie Roper. It's set in modern day Los Angeles. Millie has a whole bunch of psychological problems. Her psychiatric diagnosis is borderline personality disorder. She attempted suicide and was unsuccessful, but she really made a mess of herself physically. So apart from the psychological stuff, she's also dealing with physical disability in these stories. The project only employs people with psychiatric illnesses because they have the power to relate or cross the worlds or something more easily. So this one isn't so much vampires and werewolves, it's fairies. The writing in these is so crisp, and the main character, Millie, is a really, really interesting character. The first 2 books were super strong. I'm really looking forward to the third one. So even though fairy is not something that I super love, as a rule, these books are amazing. So that's the first 2, and they were really easy for me to pick. The third one that I've picked is not a series but a standalone, and it's a much older book. I only read this last year, but it first came out in the 80s. This is The War for the Oaks by Emma Bull. This is set in Minneapolis. The central character, Eddie McAndry, is a musician. She's a working musician. At the beginning of the story, she's just broken up with her boyfriend and left her band, which was kind of one and the same thing. And she's going through a kind of turning point in her life, and as she's sort of stalking away from this gig after having this big fight, something happens a bit freaky. And this is about fairy as well, and I just got through with saying I don't like fairy stories all that much, but yeah, I really love this one. Eddie is drawn into this world kind of against her will. The muso sort of side of it is done really well as well, so that's a really, really great story. Now, that's kind of sort of the end of my list, but I did scratch around and pick up 2 more. These are ones that I can't recommend the whole series because I have not read the whole series, but what I've read of it I enjoyed. These are books that I kind of was reading back before I had an e-reader, and back then things were a bit more hit and miss with whether or not I would get the next volume in a series, because it all depended on if I actually saw it. A lot of the time it was also before I was kind of buying books through the internet so much. It was like if you saw it in the bookshop at the time you bought it, that's kind of how it worked. Or you could special order it, but I normally didn't bother. So here are two other series that what I've read of I enjoyed, but I haven't read the whole series. So the first one, the older one I will tell you about, is Tim Powers' Fault Line series. This is only 3 books. I've read books 1 and books 3, it turns out, when I looked it all up on Goodreads. First one is called Last Call. These are set in Las Vegas. It's about gambling, high stakes gambling. It's a lot to do with tarot and sort of the Fisher King. The main character, Scott Crane, was a professional poker player, but he had a really bad night on the tables. He's now trying to win back his soul. That's the first book, Last Call. Tim Powers has a really creepy vibe, but he is a master storyteller. I don't think there's a book of his that I've read that I haven't enjoyed, and this was a good one. The last one that I will mention is one, again, that I really enjoyed the beginning of, but I just never read all of the books. It's the Retrievers series by Laura Anne Gilman, and I'm now thinking, having done the research and seen that there are more books in this series, I may in fact go and look them out myself. So I think I've read the first 3, and there's 6 in this series. The first book, Staying Dead, was published in 2006. Ren Valere is the main character in this series. It's set in Manhattan, so we finally got one in New York. Isn't every other book in the world in English set in New York? Anyway, Ren Valere is a retriever, which is kind of a fancy way of saying a thief, I think. She has some sort of paranormal powers which allows her to do this. The kinds of powers, sort of magic-y sort of powers that she uses, stuffs up technology. So it's set in like a contemporary setting, high-tech contemporary setting, but her own personal life is pretty low-tech because she fries electronics whenever she's doing magic. She has a partner who's some Russian dude, I think he's Sergei or something, and there's kind of a bit of romantic tension between the two of them for the first few books, but they haven't actually kind of, you know, jumped into bed in the ones that I've got up to at any rate. But yeah, so this one's sort of borderline paranormal romance-y, I think. I never know how you categorize these things, but I really liked the first couple of books. Like, I really liked the character and the kind of, you know, messes that she got into. So I think I'm going to go and see if I can finish out this series now. I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else recommends. As I said, I haven't actually read a huge amount of urban fantasy. If you have read any of these books and would like to tell me what you thought of them, I would love to talk to you in the comments. Hope you're all well. I'll talk to you later. Bye!